Glasgow, 30 miles from me here. You are not reporting on the grooming gangs that are white. You are not reporting on those people, right? If you were, then I would say, yes, I understand this.
We report on major crimes. We report on stories. How, James,
you know that you are spreading the agenda.
It's not an agenda. The point is, we already have enough of our own wrong-uns who should be dealt with far more quickly and sternly. However, I don't think the solution to having a bunch of murderers and rapists and paedophiles in Britain is, let's import some more.
It's a great line, Julia, but the majority of the people who come here are not rapists and paedophiles.
I didn't say they were. I didn't.
Well, there you go. This is GB News Originals. I'm Emily Carver. Please do give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And do leave a comment. Let me know what you think.
Say they were. I would never have claimed that they were. I categorically stated previously on this show, the majority of people, they're committing a crime by coming to our country. But there are too many. You listen, the stats are very, very clear. And the countries that publish the stats, whether it's Germany, whether it's France, whether it's Austria, whether it's Italy, whether it's Denmark, whether it's Sweden, and in Britain, we're starting to see it. The criminality rate from different nationalities is starkly different. It is true. Per capita, the criminality rate, even allowing for the fact they are younger men, largely they're men, and largely they're younger, and therefore more likely to commit crime than any other demographic. Their criminality rate of certain countries, people from certain countries, is off the scale higher than from other countries.
This belief is rooted in an idea.
It's fact.
This belief of yours is rooted in an idea, Julia, that Britain is somehow a land of milk and honey and good people, and we're all the best. And people out there, the others in other countries, are scary and savages and barbaric.
Absolute nonsense. I'm not claiming that at all.
Our country is made up of migrants, of immigrants from all over the world. In every
Our country is largely made up of people whose families have lived here for hundreds of thousands of years.
We are seeing a rise of ethno-nationalism. We're seeing a rise of racism. We're seeing a rise of intolerance and xenophobia, Julia, and it comes back to the fact that you are scaring your listeners every day.
It's all my fault, because people have noticed there's a problem.
Not just your fault.
We're not allowed to notice facts. Can't notice facts. James, if you're under the illusion that the risk of somebody coming from a country where they have high levels of criminality, very, very little concern for the rights of children or women or gay people, that those people are not a bigger threat to people in this country than people coming from countries which do have similar values to us, I think you're living in cloud cuckoo land.
Well, let me say, as the feminist and lefty woke whatever amongst us, Julia, let me tell you that
you're a feminist.
I'm very much concerned.
By the way, all in favour of men who claim they're women in women's toilets, right? Feminists.
About those values, yeah, because I believe trans women are women, Julia. There's a difference between us, yeah.
Because you believe in fairy tales.
No, because gender's a social construct and women are women. You're talking about sex, which is biological. It's completely different.
I'm talking about women.
Let's not open that can of worms. Let's finish this one first, right?
We're going to have to finish.
What I would say to you just briefly before we finish, right, is that it comes down to our basic values. Are we shirkers? Do we shirk our responsibilities in this country? No, we don't.
We don't have any responsibility. We don't have a responsibility to the rest of the world.
If somebody arrives on your doorstep and they claim they need help, you assess that claim, and if they need it, they need it. If they
James,
don't,
can I ask? Can we maybe give out your personal address to any asylum sequence, and you just take them in with your personal responsibility?
I will if you will. I will if you will.
No, I won't, because I know the risks. But there we are, James. Deep sighs. I'd love to talk to you for longer. I just don't think I could disagree with you more on so many things. James Matthews, former Labour Party spokesman and commentator.
The unseen geography of power and the quiet rearrangement of British society, or the quiet post-industrial town just down the road, and you might notice something shifting beneath the surface. For years, the political establishment treated certain national issues like an inconvenient mess to be swept under the carpet, or rather tucked away in working-class neighbourhoods where Westminster assumed the noise would be muffled. But the carpet has run out of space, and the political elite are suddenly discovering that the law of unintended consequences eventually comes knocking on every single door in the United Kingdom. Welcome to Britain Underneath, where we strip away the sanitized parliamentary speeches and examine the raw mechanics of British power, policy, and public life. If you value sharp, unvarnished insight into how this country actually operates behind closed doors, please take a second right now to subscribe to Britain Underneath, hit the notification bell, and join our growing community of viewers who refuse to be fed political platitudes. Your support is the absolute lifeblood of this independent platform. So let us dive straight into the quiet revolution happening across our towns today. The current debate surrounding asylum dispersal and local infrastructure has reached a fascinating and rather uncomfortable inflection point. For nearly a decade, the strategy for housing asylum applicants relied heavily on a predictable geographic pattern. Dispersal accommodation and temporary hotel leases were disproportionately concentrated in lower-income areas and post-industrial towns, where property values were modest, municipal opposition was easily overridden, and commercial hotels were eager to secure government block bookings. It was a model driven by administrative convenience and short-term cost minimisation, but it carried a profound social cost.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight to my next guest, James Mathewson. He's a former Labour Party spokesman, no longer in the Labour Party, and now left-wing commentator, and joins us. Very good morning to you, James.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. What do you make of Andy Burnham saying that middle-class people and middle-class families in their areas need to play their part, in his words, by accepting asylum seeker accommodation in their areas? Do you think he's right?
I think it's really interesting the kind of outrage that it's sparked, which is undoubtedly going to happen because I think whenever we talk about class, regardless of what the issue is we're talking about in Britain, it upsets a lot of people. But I think it is an interesting argument from Andy Burnham because, you know, those people in working class communities who, as one of your callers said, have kind of faced the calls for integration. They've faced calls from a lot of lefties who are quite snobby in places like London, you know, the kind of Islington set. Had them look down their nose at for years without even having the honest conversation about why people like me are pro-migration as opposed to anti-migration. And those conversations haven't taken place. So there has been this kind of separation between what is deemed to be working class and middle class communities for a long time. Whether this is the right argument to say you need to pull your weight more or that those communities need to be burdened less, I don't know. But I do think it is interesting because class is something we are still very much scared.
I don't think this is an issue about class. This is basically if you've worked hard or you're lucky being brought up in a nicer area, you're probably less likely to have the cheap accommodation, the HMOs, the flats available, the high streets where there are places where these people are being put. You've not had to bear the full brunt of it. And he's basically saying we all need to share the burden. We need to accept. What interesting is the word accept. Except people in the working class areas haven't accepted. They've had it imposed on them. Even often when their local councils have opposed it. I mean, some councils want to sort of have more because they think for some reason this is a good thing for their local communities. But most councils have opposed it, and yet they've had them anyway. I thought this was a Prime Minister who cared about devolution and bringing power back to local people and local councils, but apparently not.
Well, it is an interesting kind of situation because you're right. You know, those working class communities that are economically disadvantaged, post-industrial communities a lot of the time, you know, have been the areas where the Home Office has been able to secure available properties, but also relatively cheap properties, which is where before the situation of the hotels, which everyone seems to have been outraged about, was before where asylum seekers were being temporarily
but they weren't temporarily housed. I mean, my local hotel near the top of my road is a 10-minute walk away, and I live in a nice area. That hotel has been used for 4 years. It's not temporary.
Yeah, but not for the same people. The issue is, Julia,
how do you know?
The issue we've talked about.
Where do you think they've gone?
How do you know? How do you know?
How do you know? 4 years isn't temporary. How do you know that the same people aren't in there still?
Because the issue is that those people need to have their claims assessed. And if it's taken that long to assess their claims, that's the problem. But their claims get assessed. Now, they don't want to stay in the shabby, rundown, former nice hotel, as you've said, you know.
It's not shabby.
Used to be, right? But no, seriously.
I've put family members up there.
It's about cost of income. You know, the owners of these places are only taking asylum contracts because they cannot fill their rooms otherwise.
Well,
so it's those rooms that are the problem. Those accommodations are the problem. Now, people don't like those hotels. They liked even less the houses that people were put in. And that's the issue, is that where do you
but the government, the Tory government and then the Labour government saying, we're moving people out of the hotels because basically they're a focus for people's anger. Move them into local bedsits. People won't know where they are. In fact, that's not the solution. Move them into local army barracks. Well, that's not the solution if they can still just wander into the local village. Can I come back to something you said earlier? Because you said you're pro-migration. What do you mean by I'm pro-migration? Because we are talking about people illegally entering the country on rubber dinghies, sometimes, 49 foot long, as we saw over the weekend.
Now, you see, I'm somebody who believes in our responsibility as a nation. So when it comes to asylum, we have, people have the right to claim asylum. Now, for a fact, because we've talked about this many times, my issue comes when that assessment needs to be done, how quickly the assessment is done. We had 15 years of Tory austerity that stripped the Home Office of its resources. So it wasn't even able to do its basic functions. That's the problem. Now, I've got a mate whose girlfriend, right, from South America, he's Northern Irish, trying to get all of their visa paperwork and all the rest. It's been 2.5 years now, Julia. That's ridiculous. We are failing as a nation because of that. And this is an issue that stems from that. My issue is not with the small boats. My issue is not with those arrivals. I like what Andy Burnham says about opening more safe routes because I would like people not to drown in the channel. But at the end of the day, I believe that people have the fundamental right, which is an international human right, to claim asylum. It is our responsibility as a nation to deal with the paperwork.
Here's the thing. Do they have, you can argue this, most of these people are economic migrants rather than claiming asylum. They've gone through numerous safe countries. If they are fleeing a country that is war-torn, the vast majority of their fellow countrymen and women are living in the countries nearby. I don't know why these people are suddenly so much more deserving of asylum in Britain than in, say, Sudan or Mauritania or wherever. It seems to me to be people have a right. A lot of those laws, they were set up at a very, very, very different time. I don't believe that people do have a right to just pick and choose. Oh, I think this is where I'll live now. I think I'm just going to I'm going to move to the other side of the world and I'm just going to want to live here because I live in a basket case country. I don't think that we have a duty to the rest of the world to take in every single person who's got a bad life.
I'm afraid it's only going to get worse, Julia. So we need to seriously ask ourselves, what do we...
Working-class communities found themselves bearing the primary responsibility for integration, straining local GP surgeries, public services, and community cohesion, while more affluent suburban enclaves remained entirely untouched by the operational realities of national migration policy. Now, however, the government is running out of road. The target to end the use of temporary hotels by the end of this Parliament has forced Whitehall into a massive logistical scramble. With over 100 facilities still operating and local tensions simmering, senior political figures have begun advocating for a radical redistribution of responsibility. The argument being advanced is simple, yet politically explosive. Every part of the country, including affluent middle-class towns and quiet rural villages, must play its part. Proposals are currently circulating within government departments to adjust rent caps and secure private sector leases in wealthier postal codes, effectively spreading dispersal accommodation across regions that previously viewed the issue as something happening safely on a distant television screen. This proposed shift represents far more than a mere housing adjustment. It is a fundamental disruption of the tacit social contract between the state and the middle classes. For generations, higher property prices and suburban distance brought a certain level of insulation from the immediate frictions of national policy failures. When ministers suggest placing large-scale accommodation facilities in quiet, affluent villages or suburban centres, the political reaction is instant and remarkably fierce. Suddenly, the genteel newsletters and parish council meetings of leafy Britain are filled with the kind of urgent, frantic organising previously confined to former mill towns. It reveals a deep truth about British politics. Policy is always considered acceptable by the establishment until it reaches the doorsteps of those who write the editorials and fund the political campaigns. Consider the practical mechanics of how this plays out on the ground. When a commercial hotel or a disused government facility in a small community is repurposed, the local economic ecosystem changes overnight. High streets that were already struggling under the weight of business rates lose key footfall and tourism revenue. Public services that were calibrated for a static, aging population are suddenly required to adapt to a rapid influx of residents with complex health, legal, and administrative needs. When these pressures occurred in economically disadvantaged areas, national commentary often dismissed local concerns with a pat on the head and a lecture on tolerance. But as the same pressures are introduced to affluent commuter belts, the discourse transforms overnight into a high-minded debate about local planning autonomy, infrastructure capacity, and property rights. This double standard is precisely why the current dynamic is so fascinating to observe. It exposes the profound rift within British governance between the ideals preached in Westminster and the practicalities endured by local councils. The decision-makers who spent years insisting that integration was seamless and that community anxieties were merely the product of misinformation are now encountering those exact same anxieties within their own constituencies. It turns out that concern over strained local resources, school places, and public safety is not a matter of class or political ideology. It is a universal human reaction to sudden, unmanaged structural change imposed from above without consultation. Yet, despite the obvious administrative friction, the political machinery moves forward, driven by a desperate need to clear the backlogs and fulfill manifesto promises before the next electoral cycle. The government finds itself caught between a rock and a hard place. On one side lies an electorate exhausted by years of administrative inertia and broken promises regarding border integrity and processing efficiency. On the other side lies a complex network of legal obligations, human rights frameworks, and international treaties that severely restrict the state's capacity to deliver rapid, decisive outcomes. The resulting compromise is a series of short-term, reactive maneuvers, moving populations from hotels to former military barracks, from barracks to private rentals, and from urban centres to suburban villages, without ever addressing the core structural defects of the system itself. What we are witnessing is the gradual breakdown of administrative containment. The political establishment can no longer isolate national challenges within specific, politically quiet geographic zones. As the cost of living pressure continues to bite, as municipal budgets face historic deficits, and as public infrastructure operates at absolute capacity, every choice made in Whitehall creates an immediate ripple effect across the entire nation. The fantasy that Britain can maintain a high-level, complex administrative bureaucracy without the average citizen feeling the day-to-day consequences has completely evaporated. If you have made it this far into the video, take a deep breath, stay informed, and consider what these shifts mean for your own local area in the years ahead. These developments are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader pattern of state reshuffling that will define British civic life for the next decade. If you appreciate this level of grounded, serious analysis that looks beyond the daily political soundbites, please take a moment right now to subscribe to Britain Underneath. Pleading as it may sound, every single subscription helps this channel grow, allows us to keep delivering high-quality independent commentary, and ensures you never miss a deep dive into the real issues shaping our country.